In January 2022, 6 in 10 U.S. workers who could do their job from home were still working remotely all or most of the time, according to a Pew Research Center survey. While remote work has been a mainstay in recent years, what lies ahead after COVID? Will companies revert back and require employees to return to the office full-time? Or has the nature of how and where we work been forever changed?
I've been asked very early on, what do you think about the fact that Goldman's asked everybody to come back into the office? I said, look, it's fine. Goldman, the CEO of Goldman, is paid to make those sorts of judgment calls. And if they say, we think the way that people are most productive is in the office every day, then that's their call. But there are consequences to that. And some people might not want that.
That's Dr. Linda Grattan, a professor of management practice at London Business School. She's also the author of the book Redesigning Work: How to Transform Your Organization and Make Hybrid Work for Everyone. For the last 30 years, Grattan has been studying the future of work and how people in various roles perform best. She says the last couple of years have been fascinating to study because the pandemic forced an abrupt and massive change in a short period of time.
We basically changed our attitudes, our networks, fundamental thoughts about what it is we wanted from work and why we worked. And so I call that the unfreeze. You can think about organizations being frozen before the pandemic, in the sense that everybody knew what they had to do. It was all highly structured. During the pandemic, it was what I would call the unfreeze. Lots of questionings about why are we doing this? Could we do it differently? And I think now we're in the refreeze, where we're beginning to reassess what it is we want to do and why we want to do it.
Millions of Americans are currently asking these questions themselves as COVID winds down and life becomes more normal. With some employers mandating a return to the office, some people are wondering, why go back if the same tasks can be done from home?
I was talking to somebody in an investment bank in New York yesterday, and she said, Linda, I have just spent 2 hours commuting into this office, and I'm going to spend 2 hours commuting back, and I've been on Zoom calls all day. She said, I could have done that from home. So I think, people, individual employees, people like you and I are asking ourselves, why are we doing that? At the same time, big organizations and small organizations are saying, I wonder if we should do that differently. And part of that, of course, is the Great Resignation. The fact that what's been really fascinating is after the pandemic, people haven't just rushed back.
Human resource experts like Grattan argue that work has been transformed forever by this pandemic. Thousands of companies are looking inward at what initiatives are necessary to retain and recruit the best talent in this competitive labor market. Many workers are not only factoring in salary, title, or PTO anymore, but also the ability to work from different environments. For example, Twitter has recently reopened its global offices, but is not mandating that employees come in. Instead, people can choose to work wherever they feel most creative and productive. Uber, on the other hand, has set a return to office date of April 25th, but are only asking employees to spend at least half of their time in the office, and the other half can be remote. These arrangements are not only seen in prominent companies or high-paying roles, but in other places too.
Funnily enough, the very first research on home working was in call centers. And what they found was is that call center workers tend to be more productive when they work from home. Why? Well, they tend to work longer hours, basically, because they're not doing a commute. Let's imagine you have a 2-hour commute and you're now a call center worker. What you do is you sort of give an hour of that to the company and you give an hour of that to yourself. I mean, you don't mean to, but that's what happens. And of course, you're not interrupted. People are very interrupted when they're in offices. So we found productivity went up in call centers when call center people work from home. However, after 6 months, about a third of them said, look, this isn't for me. I need to spend a day or two in the office. I don't want to be on my own all the time. And some people said, I haven't got the right sort of setup at home. So it really then depended on the individual. But actually, productivity held up pretty well for people who liked to work from home.
Grattan points out that these decisions on whether to be remote, in person, or hybrid are complicated. Even if there's a model that works incredibly well for employees in one industry, it might not be suitable for another.
For example, I'm talking to one of the architectural practices. Well, the architects, the engineers, the designers, they like to get together to really talk about a complex building that they're doing. They want to be in the office and they want to be face to face and they want to do lots of cooperation work. But there's quite a lot of work which is coordination work. Let's say, for example, you're coordinating with somebody about a project you're doing or a piece of work you're doing. Frankly, you can do that over Zoom or Microsoft platforms, and it doesn't really matter where you are. So I would start by asking, what do we really need to get this job done really well? And then look at all your options.
And Grattan says not all personnel like working remotely. Some people's personalities mesh well with being in the office Monday through Friday. However, she says this is not most people. The majority enjoy having the power to decide to go in when they find it most useful.
I'm in the office because I'm going to see people, I'm going to have workshops, I'm going to have really important meetings, it's going to be stuff that I can do. It's more than simply talking to people on Zoom or on a platform, on the telephone or whatever. So I think that's still got to be worked out. And my guess is there's going to be quite a pushback now, not so much because people say, I want more flexibility, but rather they're saying, why am I doing this? I think that the woman I spoke to in investment banking, if she found that being in the office was incredibly productive for her that day, she'd be the first one to be there. Of course, she wants to do the very best she can. But actually, she said, I've been on Zoom all day. I haven't spoken to anyone in the office. Why was I here?
And being able to socialize is another big part of coming in. Why commute if you're showing up to a nearly empty workplace?
The other reason we love the office, if we did, is, we met people for lunch. We talked about our kids or our families or our hobbies, and that sort of just pleasant socializing. That's really important. And that's really about the culture of the place.
While there's Zoom and Slack, there's still nothing that compares to chatting with a coworker near the water cooler. Grattan says technology has the opportunity to create more seamless workplace engagement in coming years.
If you knew that some really interesting people for you were going to be in the office at 3:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, you'd go in to see them. But you don't know that now because you don't necessarily have their diary and so on. So I think we're going to see real technologies around scheduling work.
Traditional hiring practices have also shifted due to COVID. And we're not just talking about Zoom interviews.
Some of the big companies like PwC, which recruits tens of thousands of young consultants, graduates every year, last year, they did it completely through virtual reality. The people put on goggles, they went into a virtual reality conference, they met each other on the conference. It worked well. So, I think that that's going to be something that we'll explore.
Grattan does believe that a hybrid workplace is the best of both worlds for many companies where job duties can be done from home. This gives employees autonomy while still carving out time in person to strengthen collaboration and workplace culture. In addition to deciding where work is being done, there's also a growing debate around when people work, especially in Europe.
If you look at the hours that people work over the last 100 years, the hours have gone down. So if you looked at your great-grandparents, they were working a lot longer hours than you work or that I work. And so the 5-day week is a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, we used to work on Saturday mornings. When I started work 30 years ago, it wasn't unusual for people to go into the office on Saturday mornings. That went. So we now work from Monday to Friday. So what we're seeing, particularly in Europe, is a whole bunch of companies experimenting with the 4-day week. And what they're doing is they're setting it up as a proper experiment. So they're saying, we're going to measure productivity. We're going to go to a 4-day week and we're going to see whether productivity stays the same or it goes up. And they're working with colleagues of mine from Oxford and Cambridge University to measure that. And I think that's going to be a really interesting project.
Who knows? Maybe 20 years from now, the norm will be a 3-day weekend. Every company and industry is different. but only time will tell how office policies will shake out. To find out more about this topic and our guest, Dr. Linda Gratton, visit viewpointsradio.org. Also check out her book, Redesigning Work: How to Transform Your Organization and Make Hybrid Work for Everyone, available online and in bookstores. For more behind the scenes, search Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri. I'm Gary Price. Coming up on Viewpoints.
We don't have any FDA-approved medications for cocaine or for methamphetamine or for cannabis.
The difficult task of finding effective treatments for addiction. Then,
we think of JFK and we think of RFK. We think of the Kennedys of the past and the roles that they played and the tragedies that they've faced.
Uncovering the Kennedys you've heard little about. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints.